Now, millions of households in the UK will see their energy bills skyrocket as the price cap is hiked to £3,549 from October, with regulator Ofgem announcing an 80% energy increase. This risks pushing more families into fuel poverty this winter. According to the Office for National Statistics, winter energy bills are set to be more than triple what they were a year ago, costing more than 11% of the household's median disposable income. German consumer sentiment is projected to hit a record low for the third month in a row in September as households brace for energy bills to go through the roof. The GfK Institute said its consumer sentiment index, based on a survey of around 2,000 Germans, fell to minus 36.5 heading into September, continuing a series of record lows that began in July with a revised recording of minus 27.7 and continuing in August with a downward revised minus 30.9 points. Oil prices have risen as much as $1 on Friday on signs of improving fuel demand, although further gains were capped as the market awaited clues from the U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell on the outlook for rate hikes in a speech later today. Brent crude futures climbed 1% to $100.33 a barrel, while U.S. WTI crude futures rose 1.1% to $93.50 per barrel. Both contracts jumped in the early trade by as much as $1 after slumping about $2 on Thursday. Meanwhile, Asian markets rose on Friday after a Wall Street rally ahead of a speech by the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell that is expected to reiterate his plan to ramp up interest rates to fight inflation. Adding to the strong buying sentiment were signs of progress in talks between the U.S. and Chinese regulators that could see tech titans avoid a delisting from the New York Wall Street. Wall Street's three main indexes ended well up on Thursday, and Asia followed the lead with Tokyo, Sydney, Seoul, Singapore, Taipei, and Wellington all well up as well. You're watching Business Edge. Up next, we get into the gig economy, especially as the World Economic Forum has released its 2022 Global Gender Report. The conversation after this. While the phrase gig economy may be new to many people, it is simply a labor market characterized by the prevalence of short-term contracts or freelance work as opposed to permanent jobs. The gig economy is based on flexible, temporary or freelance jobs, often involving connecting with clients or customers through an online platform. This sector of the economy has come into focus once again after the World Economic Forum released the 2022 Global Gender Gap Report. This yearly report measures the progress of gender parity across 4 parameters. Now, in 2022, Sub-Saharan Africa will have closed 67.9% of its gender gap, giving it the 6th best regional score. It places higher than South Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa combined. South Africa, Namibia, Rwanda are the top-ranking nations in the area, while Mali, Chad, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo are at the bottom. From Accra, Ghana, I have Yasmin Kumi. She's the founder and CEO of the Africa Foresight Group, joining me to look at Africa's growing gig economy. Yasmin, welcome to Business Edge. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So in all honesty, the gig economy is really nothing new. Many of us probably know a few people who are involved in it, but it's also taking on a new dimension because of the digital aspect of things. So let's start from there. How has the digital gig economy been really growing and developing on the continent?
Well, I mean, we're talking a lot about it, which is exciting. Obviously, the digital economy and the gig economy is a huge opportunity for Africa because we need a lot more jobs. One stat that I always keep mentioning to people is that we are currently only creating a sixth of the jobs that we need in Africa, right? I think per year we have about 18 million people entering the job market across the continent, and we're only creating around 3 million jobs. Now, if you look at the stats in a place like India, where the digital economy through offshoring has taken off many, many decades ago, they have actually created millions of jobs just through that. So the opportunity is massive. But to be honest, if we look at it today, there's actually still a lot of work to do. We only have less than 100,000 gig economy jobs on the continent right now. And if you look at the biggest freelancing platforms in the world, Upwork being the biggest, you will find that there's still a very, very small portion of African talent on it. So my short answer to you would be the opportunity is big, the narrative is growing, but there's still a lot of work to do to make it happen in Africa.
Okay, so for the African gig economy market, what do you think is driving the growth of this industry? What trends are we looking at? Because when we look at the West, you can easily see how COVID-19 seems to have played a large part. We're hearing terms like the Great Resignation. This morning I was reading about something called quiet resigning, when you don't actually resign, but you've decided that you really want to emphasize life-work balance versus work-life balance. So for us on the continent, what do you think are the trends driving the growth of this gig economy?
Right. I mean, globally people say that it's the pandemic. And of course, the pandemic has had a big impact because now you have organizations that used to be completely brick and mortar and only had people working in offices, having to start working with people in remote locations. And that's opened up the conversation, right? Because now you're not necessarily tied to one place anymore when you're looking for talent. You can hire talent across the world. And obviously people are starting to realize that, oh, Africa is actually a continent with a lot of great untapped talent that I can now actually leverage. We've seen that in the software engineering space. Obviously, Andela has been a big front runner in that, right? Even before the pandemic. I think, though, that aside from the pandemic, of course, opening up the conversation and opening up more opportunities when it comes to working with global companies, there's also a lot of local factors that are actually adding to all of this. I'd say maybe three for now to keep my contribution short. The first one is that we have an urbanization issue in Africa. And I think if you look at a place like Lagos or Accra, where I am, people are flocking into these places because it's the only place where you can get the more attractive and well-paid jobs. But it's also creating a lot of issues when it comes to living standards and just the capacity of these cities, right? People actually want to be able to live in other parts of their countries, and the gig economy is making that possible. At Africa Foresight Group, for example, our company, we have people in northern Nigeria, we have people in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. They're not in Joburg, Lagos, or Accra. So I think that's a huge driver, really allowing people to work from where they want to be and not having to be in those key commercial hubs. I think the second thing that's obviously really important is that we've had an improvement when it comes to internet penetration across the continent and the availability of good broadband. Of course, that's now making it possible, right? When we started AFG, we were really struggling at times with running fully remote teams. We were working with flexible workers, but we still had a lot of situations where we were bringing them into the offices of clients that they were working for because the productivity was just challenging to maintain with bad internet. Now you're seeing that even when I go to more remote locations in Ghana or South Africa, I can get enough good bandwidth in order to be able to work fully remotely. And that's, of course, also a huge driver. I think the third driver, actually, to be honest, is the current economic situation. I mean, you've talked about COVID-19, but generally we're currently experiencing a very troubling world economy with a lot of recessions happening and really, really tough currency environments. And the gig economy and the ability to work internationally, no matter where you are, gives you access to hard currency income. So I think it's also really driving up the appetite when it comes to what workers want to do.
And I will probably add also unemployment across much of the African continent, with youth unemployment being one of the issues that many African countries are also facing. So let's look at this report that was released recently, as I mentioned, the 2022 Global Gender Gap Report. And it's an interesting thing because there are industry sort of specific dynamics that play out. And I want to look particularly at the industry you're in. So the report says that while the global gender gap has been closed by some 68.1% at the current rate of progress, it will still take 132 years for men and women's pay to reach full parity. This is just slightly better than the 2021 estimate of 136 years to reach parity. So when we look at this in terms of the gig economy, the freelance, the accounting sector, how is it playing out in your industry, this sort of wage disparity that is a massive issue?
Yeah. No, I'm so happy you're bringing this up because even having looked at the report, I was quite excited that we're linking the gender gap conversation with the flexible work and gig economy conversation, right? AFG is building the largest future of work platform in Africa. We are a talent tech company and we're completely women-led. And I've really seen for myself how the gig economy and flexible work revolution is changing the game for women for different reasons, right? The first reason being that, of course, flexible work allows you to be more flexible in combining family and career without having to step back on either. We have about 45% of women in our own talent pool at AFG, many of who have children and are really enjoying the opportunity to be able to work flexibly, right? And that allows them to continue their career without much interruption. And for us, it's really not a problem because as long as they're able to get the work done, we don't necessarily care where they are or how many hours they're working or when in the morning they start or if they went to drop their kids to school before they started work. The flexible environment really, really makes it happen for women, and that's super, super exciting. I think that there's also another big advantage, which is that you build young people into entrepreneurs through flexible work. And, you know, there are all these amazing statistics in Ghana, for example, about how women are actually much better entrepreneurs at times than men. And flexible working is actually entrepreneurship, right? Because you're your own boss, you manage your own time, you also have to manage your own cash flow, etc. And we've really seen that, especially in the talent development programs we have for younger people. We have an analyst program, for instance, where you can join as young as 18. We have a very, very huge interest from women. So we have a very, very good women representation in that program. I think women at their heart are brilliant entrepreneurs. And if you give them the chance to manage their own time and resources the way they need to, there's no way that you can still argue that women can't earn the same as a man can in any job. I really think that flexible work is actually a huge accelerator of correcting that gender pay gap. And I mean, obviously at AFG, because everything is based on output, like we definitely don't have any gender gap. And I'm very proud of that because I think that's the future that we all want to build, right?
Okay, so I'll come back to how we close the gap as we wrap up, but I want to ask about this because you talked about management, and I think another vital aspect of this conversation is, particularly in the tech space where a lot of the gig economy is growing and blooming, we're seeing we're seeing a disparity between how much investment women-led or women-founded technology companies are bringing in versus the amount of money male-dominated or male-founded technology companies bring in. Even though, as you said, I like saying this, it's the data that shows that the women-led management teams tend to perform better in the long run and overall. So when you look at that kind of gap, because it can also lead into the wage gap, how do you think opening up the space to women in management, especially in the gig economy and the technology space, can actually help us close the gender pay gap?
Oh, well, it can help us greatly, right? Because then we can start actually showing the proof that it's actually working and there's nothing to be worried about when it comes to putting a woman into a management position. To be honest, though, I personally think that we are actually ahead of many other parts of the world in Africa when it comes to that. You see more women-led companies across Africa than you see in other places. Of course, the question is how well supported is that woman manager or woman founder or woman entrepreneur. There we still have a lot of work to do, especially when it comes to the current funding gap that is in everyone's mouth when it comes to startups, right? But I think generally change starts from the top, and we need to be able to show that, yes, you can have women-led companies do as well, even better than male-led companies. I agree that the data is there, but it also depends on what data people are looking at. I said in a pitch not too long ago, I think about a month and a half ago, where I was confronted with a data set by an investor that showed how women-led companies that are led by women in their 30s are slower in generating an exit or follow-on funding. And the argument was because of family planning. And then they started asking me a lot of questions about what my family plans are.
Wow, that's interesting. All right, so Yasmin, as I wrap up with you, because of time, unfortunately, I'll get to that last question now, which is how do we close this gap? As we see the gig economy growing, more young people, as you said, are looking to that and they're becoming entrepreneurs as well. We want to see young girls flourish because Africa can't go forward if Africa's women and young girls are not part of the conversation and they're not brought to the table. So very quickly, how do we close this gap?
We close this gap by making sure that we make the flexible work revolution happen. I really believe that the flexible work revolution is the way out. And if I look at it right now, especially in Africa, entrepreneurs, CEOs, managers have kind of tried to embrace flexible work a little bit because they were forced to do so as a result of COVID, but they haven't yet understood the business opportunity behind it. And really empowering women and closing the gender gap is a business opportunity. It's not just something nice to do. So African private sector really needs to roll their sleeves up and say, we are making flexible work happen in Africa for our own benefit and for the benefit of our society.
All right, so we'll end the conversation there. Yasmin, Kumi, thank you so much for joining me. And with the gig economy, I might be, checking in with you very soon. Let's see how to put these skills to work outside of Business Edge.
Thanks for
Have a good one.